You ever have one of those moments where someone speaks to you like you're a side character in your own life? That was me on my 18th birthday, sitting across from my stepmother as she smiled like she hadn't just dropped a bomb. Rent's due next month, Ivy. $500 a month, adult responsibilities and all that. Let me rewind a bit. My name's Ivy Mercer, and for most of my life, it was just me and my dad, Tom. My mum died in a car crash when I was 4, too young to fully understand what grief was, but old enough to remember the sound of my dad crying through the walls at night. We lived in this old Victorian-style home in the suburbs, cream siding, creaky floors, and a lilac bush Mum had planted right before she passed. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Technically, mine. My grandparents' mum's folks left the house in my name when they passed. Dad never made a big deal of it. He said it was their way of making sure I always had a place. For years, it was peaceful. Quiet dinners, movie nights, morning waffles every Sunday. Dad didn't really date, just the occasional coffee date that never made it past meet the babysitter. But when I turned 14, he met her. Kiddo Dad said one evening, fiddling with his collar like he was 16 again, "I want you to meet someone." Her name was Elaine. She breezed into our house like she already owned it. High heels clicking on the hardwood nails, perfect perfume, heavy. But what really caught my attention, the two people behind her. My son Chase, he's in college, and this is Lena, she's a junior in high school. Chase didn't look up from his phone. Lena gave me a once-over like I was an unpaid extra in her movie. Later that night, Lena cornered me in the kitchen, arms crossed, like she ran the place. "Just so you know, we're not going to be friends. Let's not pretend." I remember blinking at her, wondering if this was a prank. Spoiler, it wasn't. 6 months later, Dad married Elaine in a courthouse ceremony. She and her kids moved in the very next week. That's when everything started to shrink. Chase took over the guest room. Lena claimed the study. Elaine's belongings multiplied like a virus, scented candles, throw pillows, 3 different blenders. Who even needs that many? Bathrooms became war zones. Either Elaine was having her me time with a dozen serums, or Lena was filming TikToks while I stood outside with wet hair and a dying phone battery. Still, I didn't complain. Not when Dad looked lighter than he had in years. Not when he started humming again while frying eggs. I told myself he deserves this, just give it time. Then Dad got promoted. He came home that night practically vibrating with joy. Regional sales director, he announced, tossing his jacket on the couch. Elaine's eyes lit up like she'd just won the lottery. She immediately started talking about updating the kitchen, maybe even a vacation. I was stuck on one word: travel. His new job meant he'd be gone more, sometimes for weeks. The first trip, that's when the shift happened. The minute his car disappeared down the road, Elaine turned to me, her smile gone. "Ivy, we need structure. With your father away, I expect more help around here." What followed was a regime. I had to be home by 4:30, no exceptions. No sports, no clubs, no studying at friends' places. I had to cook 3 nights a week, vacuum every other day, and support the household. Meanwhile, Lena strutted around like royalty, her only task being to decide what color nails she wanted next. Chase floated in and out, eating, sleeping occasionally, using the laundry machine like it owed him something. One day, elbows deep in dishwater, I finally asked, why doesn't Lena have to help? Elaine didn't even look up from her magazine. "She's focusing on college prep. She's filming thirst traps in the living room." "What did you say?" "Nothing." I went back to scrubbing, fists clenched. But the real kicker came on my birthday. We had a bland dinner, microwaved lasagna, no cake, just a limp happy birthday, and an awkward toast from Dad, who flew out the next morning. A week later, we sat down for dinner again. Same people, same table. And that's when Elaine dropped it. "You're 18 now. Time to contribute. Rent's due on the 1st. I choked on my water. $500, she continued smoothly. "Seems fair. Adults pay their way." I looked around the table. Chase smirked. Lena actually giggled. "And what if I don't pay?" I asked. Elaine folded her hands like a smug queen. "Then I guess you'll need to find somewhere else to live. We can't support freeloaders." I sat there, frozen, heart thudding. All those years of quiet obedience, of swallowing my pride, of watching her play victim when Dad came home. And now this. I took a deep breath and smiled. It felt new, solid. "That's interesting," I said. "Because you'll need to find a new plan. I'm not paying rent." Elaine narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me? This house isn't yours or Dad's, it's mine." There was a pause. Then Chase snorted. "Yeah, okay." I leaned forward, locking eyes with Elaine. "My grandparents put the deed in my name before they died. You're living in my house, Elaine." Her face went slack. She reached for her phone with a trembling hand and put Dad on speaker. "Tom," she barked, "your daughter is saying outrageous things about the house. She claims it belongs to her." A pause, then Dad's tired voice, yeah, that's true. My in-laws left it to Ivy when they passed." "You didn't think to mention that." "It never came up." Elaine's face turned beet red. She slammed her phone on the table and stared at me like I'd just betrayed a sacred trust. "Oh, don't worry," I said sweetly. "Let's forget this ever happened. No rent needed." "Right." I excused myself from dinner with my plate still full, heart hammering. Upstairs I heard hushed arguments, the floor creaking with frantic pacing. The next morning I woke up early. I didn't go downstairs. Instead I stood on the landing listening to Elaine on the phone. "She's making things difficult, Tom. You need to get her out. Suggest college out of state. Push her." I gritted my teeth, every word sinking in like ice. She wasn't just trying to manipulate me, she was trying to erase me. But I was done playing their game. Next part, I'd play mine. The day after I heard Elaine on the phone plotting to ship me off like some inconvenience, I made myself a silent promise no more playing nice. I'd spent years walking on eggshells, pretending this was just temporary. That if I kept my head down, things would go back to how they used to be. But they wouldn't, and deep down, I knew that. I came downstairs like nothing happened, poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the table while Elaine scrolled through her phone like she hadn't just tried to exile me from my own home. Chase wandered in next, yawning, wearing boxers and a hoodie like he was the landlord. Lena followed soon after, fresh-faced and smug. "Good morning," I said, voice sweet as sugar. "Hope everyone slept well." Elaine looked up suspiciously. "You're in a good mood." I shrugged. "Just reflecting on adulthood, responsibility and all that." They didn't catch it. Not yet. It wasn't until the following morning, when I handed out 3 crisp printed notices, that the mood shifted. "What is this?" Elaine asked, holding the paper between her fingers like it was contagious. "New house policy," I said, sipping my coffee. "Rent begins next month. $500 each, due on the 1st. The silence was glorious. "You're joking," Chase said, still half asleep. "I'm not." Elaine's jaw twitched. "You can't seriously expect us to pay you." "I didn't seriously expect to be charged rent by my own stepmother for living in my own house," I said. "Yet here we are." "You can't do this," she snapped. This isn't legal." "Oh, but it is." I smiled. I checked. Elaine stood there flustered and fuming, and it was the first time in 4 years I saw her lose her grip on the script. She thought she had me cornered. She thought I was still the scared girl cleaning bathrooms and doing everyone's laundry while they binge-watched Netflix. But I had changed, and not just on paper. I'd spent the past year growing a spine. That night I emailed Dad. No drama, just facts. I attached copies of the original deed, plus a link to the state rental laws. I laid everything out, her attempt to evict me, the rent demand, the manipulation. I didn't ask him to take sides, I just asked him to know the truth. No response. Instead, I got one from Elaine. The next morning, folded neatly on my pillow like some passive-aggressive fortune cookie. "If this continues, your father and I will be forced to take appropriate action." Cute. By the weekend, they were all walking on eggshells, but in the way I used to. Elaine would slam cabinet doors louder than necessary. Chase barely left his room. Lena was suddenly interested in doing her part around the house, mostly for show. Meanwhile, I started locking my bedroom door. I kept receipts, took photos of everything, and even installed a Ring camera on the front door under the guise of neighborhood safety. Call it paranoia. I called it being prepared. The real kicker came a few days later when Dad finally returned. I heard his car pull into the driveway and nearly laughed. The man had no idea he was walking into a silent war zone. "Hey kiddo," he called, dropping his bags by the door like nothing had changed. "Hey Dad?" He hugged me like he still deserved to, then turned toward the kitchen where Elaine waited, arms crossed, like she was holding back a legal deposition. They argued that night, quiet but intense. I heard my name several times. Words like unfair and disrespectful were tossed around like cheap dishes. Later, Dad knocked on my door. He looked exhausted. "Can we talk?" I nodded, letting him in. He stood there awkwardly, as if the house felt unfamiliar now. "Elaine told me what's going on," he began. "Did you read my email?" He hesitated. I skimmed it. I didn't say anything. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She's upset, Ivy. This whole rent thing, it caught her off guard." "She's upset," I repeated. "Dad, she tried to kick me out." "I think you're overreacting." Those 5 words hit me like a slap. "Do you even hear yourself?" He sighed. "You've always been independent. You'll leave for college soon anyway. Maybe this is just growing pains." There it was. The dismissal. Like everything I'd endured, the chores, the manipulation, the emotional isolation was just puberty and mood swings. "I'm not leaving, Dad," I said. "Not just because she wants me gone. He shifted his weight. Well, she's not going to stay if this continues. I nodded. Maybe she shouldn't. That caught him off guard. You want me to choose? He asked. I don't want anything from you, I said quietly, except honesty. He left without answering. The next week passed in slow motion. Elaine went from cold shoulder to sugary fake kindness. Ivy, sweetie. I picked up your favorite cereal. I washed your sheets for you. Lena started leaving motivational post-it notes on the bathroom mirror, an obvious guilt tactic. Chase pretended none of it existed. But I didn't budge. I kept studying for finals. I filed taxes. I mailed off FAFSA paperwork. I watered the lilacs. I was done shrinking. Then it happened. A knock on the door. I opened it to find Elaine standing there, a forced smile plastered on her face and a homemade pie in her hands, like this was an episode of the Brady Bunch. We've been thinking, she said. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I raised an eyebrow. Let's just wipe the slate clean, she continued. No rent, no grudges, just family. It was almost convincing if I hadn't seen the text messages. Earlier that morning, her phone had lit up with a message from Dad while she was in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to look, but there it was. Just try to calm her down. We need her gone before summer. I looked at the pie, then back at her. No thanks, I said, closing the door slowly. Behind it, I could hear her exhale through her nose like a bull about to charge. I locked the door. Then I packed my overnight bags and left for Sarah's house. I needed a weekend away to breathe, to think, to remind myself that sanity still existed in the world. While I was gone, they called me 7 times, left 4 voicemails. We need to talk. We overreacted. Let's figure this out. They weren't trying to make peace. They were trying to reset the board. And this time I wasn't playing. When I got back from Sarah's house that Sunday evening, the house felt different. It wasn't anything obvious. No furniture flipped, no broken windows, but the air had a charge to it. Like everyone was waiting to see what I'd do next. I walked through the front door with my duffel bag over my shoulder, expecting Elaine to pop out with another peace-offering pastry or maybe a forced group hug. Instead, she stayed out of sight. Lena was camped out in the living room with her laptop pretending to type while clearly watching for my reaction. Chase didn't even bother looking up from his Xbox. The tension was thick, but no one said a word. And honestly, that silence was better than the fake smiles and saccharine apologies. I went straight to my room and locked the door. That night I slept better than I had in months, because I knew what was coming next. Monday morning, I went to school like normal. Sat through homeroom, turned in an essay, ate cold pizza in the cafeteria. But every free period I had was spent at the counselor's office, printing legal forms, making phone calls, and confirming what I already suspected. Owning the house meant I could do a whole lot more than just ask people to pay rent. By Wednesday, I had a copy of the title, the property tax receipts, and most importantly, a notarized letter confirming that I was the sole legal owner. My name. No co-signers, no shared equity. That night, I laid the letter on the kitchen table, right where Elaine liked to sit and plan her little family updates. Then I waited. It didn't take long. I was upstairs brushing my teeth when I heard her voice sharp-clipped, rising with every syllable. Tom, did you know about this? She filed paperwork. She's trying to take over the entire house. My dad's voice was quieter, hesitant. Elaine, we already knew the house was in her name. You said she wouldn't do anything with it. I said I didn't think she would. Well, you thought wrong. I shut my door and turned on music loud enough to drown them out. The next morning was tense. Elaine poured her coffee with more aggression than necessary. Chase opened the fridge like he expected it to explode. Lena didn't even look at me. Morning, I said, flipping a page in my textbook like I hadn't just rewritten the rules of the house. Elaine sat down slowly, setting her mug down with a sharp clink. We need to talk, she said. Go ahead. I understand you're feeling empowered lately, she began, each word carefully measured like she was talking to a volatile investor. I'm feeling clear, I corrected. There's a difference. She exhaled through her nose. We've had a rough start, I'll admit that. But it doesn't help anyone if you act like a dictator. This isn't a game. No, it's a contract, I said, sliding the notarized letter across the table. And this is me enforcing it. She didn't touch the paper. Instead, she leaned back and smiled. But it wasn't the warm kind. It was the kind people use when they're about to drop a threat disguised as a compliment. You know, she said, voice syrupy sweet, you're going to college soon. It'll be much harder to manage this house from a dorm room. Wouldn't it make more sense to let adults handle things? There it was, the real game. I already spoke with the property manager, I said calmly. They'll handle everything while I'm gone. Rent collection, maintenance, inspections. Elaine blinked. And they already did a walkthrough last night. Said everything looked great. except for the unregistered tenants. Now her face went pale. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Oh, I would." That was when Dad walked in bedraggled, holding his tie like it was a noose. "What's going on?" Elaine stood furious. "Your daughter is threatening to evict us." Dad looked at me like I'd grown horns. "Ivy, come on." "No, you come on," I said. "You let her run this house like it was her personal kingdom. You let me get pushed around for years while you looked the other way. I kept quiet because I thought you were happy, but I'm done shrinking to keep the peace." Elaine scoffed. "So what now? You're kicking us out? Unless you sign a lease and pay rent like adults, yes." Later that night, Dad came to my room again. No knock this time. Just walked right in like we were still pretending everything was normal. "You blindsided us," he said, arms crossed. "You could have handled this differently." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who used to sit on the floor and braid my hair. The man who built a tree house in the backyard when I was 6, even though he was terrified of heights. "What would have been different, Dad?" I asked. "If I had just asked nicely again." "You would have done what? Told Elaine to be nicer. Told Chase to clean a plate for once. Told Lena to maybe not film a TikTok while I'm scrubbing the baseboards." He didn't answer. "I kept waiting for you to choose me," I said, voice low. "But you never did." Dad's shoulders dropped. For the first time, he looked ashamed. "You were always so strong," he muttered. "I thought you didn't need me to step in." "No, Dad, I needed you to stop watching me drown and calling it character building." He sat down on the edge of my bed, but the distance between us felt years wide. "I don't know what to do now," he said quietly. "Then maybe you should ask yourself why you chose her over me every time." He didn't argue, just stood up and left the room without another word. By the end of the week, things were in motion. The lease agreements went out via email. I kept them polite but firm, rent due on the first 3-day grace period, no exceptions. The property manager confirmed a lockbox would be installed for key access. I also sent copies of everything to Dad just to keep the paper trail clean. Elaine didn't speak to me for 3 days. Lena started slamming doors again. Chase tried to act like nothing was happening. But the balance had shifted and they all knew it. On Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find 3 packed duffel bags by the door. Elaine was wearing sunglasses inside classic move. Lena was pouting like she'd just lost prom queen. Chase looked annoyed, but mostly because someone interrupted his sleep. "We'll be staying with my sister for now," Elaine said stiffly. I nodded. "Take care." She opened the door, paused, then turned to me. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head. "Will I?" She didn't respond. Just walked out, followed by her kids. And just like that, the house was mine again. Quiet. Still. Mine. I stood in the hallway for a long time, just listening to the silence. It didn't feel empty. It felt free. The first morning after they left, I didn't wake up to the sound of a curling iron whirring or someone stomping around the hallway. The kitchen wasn't littered with coffee cups and half-finished smoothies. The bathroom door wasn't locked for 45 minutes straight. And no one was yelling my name. It was weird, but in the best possible way. I made myself scrambled eggs and actually got to eat them hot. I drank coffee while it was still fresh. I walked barefoot through the living room and didn't trip over someone else's shoes or designer handbag tossed across the floor like it lived there. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peace. And I didn't even know how much I needed it until I had it. Graduation was a few weeks away, and the house became my sanctuary. I dove into finals prep like it was my full-time job. I set up my laptop in the dining room, laid out college forms across the table, and blasted lo-fi beats through the speaker with no one telling me to turn it down. Sarah came over a few times to study. "This place feels calmer," she said during one visit, curling up on the couch with a textbook. "Because it is," I said. No reality TV blaring from every room. No emergency target runs for nail polish. She laughed, then looked at me. "Are you okay though? Like, really okay?" I paused. Honestly, for the first time in a long while, yeah, I think I am. But okay didn't mean I wasn't still angry, or sad, or a little bit hollow. I hadn't heard a single word from my dad since they left. No call, no text, not even a forwarded utility bill. It was like he'd chosen to disappear with them, like disappearing was easier than facing what he'd done. I kept expecting him to show up, maybe to apologize, maybe to scream, I wasn't sure which. But the door never knocked, and my phone stayed silent. One day, I opened the junk drawer in the kitchen and found an old photo of me and Dad from when I was maybe 9. We were sitting on the porch eating popsicles. His arm was around my shoulder, and we both looked sunburned and ridiculous. I stared at it longer than I meant to. That version of him, the one who built me a snow fort and tried to braid my hair, even though he sucked at it, that guy felt like a ghost now. I wanted to believe he was still in there somewhere. But some ghosts don't come back. Graduation day arrived on a Thursday, warm and cloudless. The kind of May day that practically screamed fresh starts. Sarah and I stood in the crowded parking lot adjusting our caps and trying not to trip over our gowns. "You think your dad's coming?" she asked gently. I shook my head. I doubt it. And I was right. The ceremony felt like something out of a dream. Too many faces, too much applause, teachers I'd only seen through Zoom, showing up in sunglasses like celebrities. When my name was called, I walked across the stage with my shoulders back and my chin high. I didn't look for my dad in the crowd. I didn't need to. After the ceremony, I took pictures with Sarah and her parents, who treated me like one of their own. Her mum even brought me a small bouquet of daisies. "Congratulations, sweetie," she said, hugging me tight. "You did it." "I really did," I whispered. We went out for burgers afterwards. Sarah's dad insisted on paying, and we toasted with milkshakes. It wasn't the celebration I thought I'd have a year ago, but it was perfect in its own way. Real, safe, mine. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was folding laundry. Dad. I stared at the screen like it was a snake. He hadn't called in weeks. Months, really, if you counted emotionally. I let it ring. Then I let it ring again. Finally, I answered. "Hi," I said, tone flat. There was a pause. "Hey, kiddo." I hated how quickly my throat tightened. How hearing his voice still hit something inside me that hadn't completely healed. I saw pictures, he continued. "Graduation. You looked beautiful." "Thanks." Another long pause. "I should have been there," he said, voice low. "Yeah," I replied. "You should have." I messed up Ivy. That one sat in the air for a moment. "You think I asked? You watched someone treat me like a maid for 4 years and said nothing. And then, when I finally stood up for myself, you walked out the door with her." "I didn't walk away from you," he said quickly. "You didn't stay either." He sighed. I thought keeping the peace was better than causing drama." "And how'd that work out?" I asked. "Peace for who?" He didn't answer. "You said nothing when she tried to kick me out of my own house, Dad. You said nothing." "I know," he whispered. "And then when I stood up to her, you acted like I was the problem. Like I ruined some fantasy family you were clinging to." More silence. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I don't know if that's enough anymore," I said quietly. "I wanted to believe you were the guy from that photo. I found the one who used to make pancakes shaped like animals and show up to every science fair. But that guy didn't just vanish. He chose to leave. I didn't know how to fix it." "I wasn't asking you to fix it. I was asking you to see me. And you didn't." We both stayed quiet after that. He didn't hang up, and neither did I. "I miss you," he said. "I miss who you used to be." Then I ended the call. That night, I sat on the back porch with my laptop, a blanket, and the summer breeze. I clicked through my college portal. Northwestern had sent the final housing form. It asked if I'd like to apply for early move-in. I clicked yes. The house was mine, but it was time to let it go for now. I'd lined up Anderson Property Management to handle it. A young family was moving in, a teacher, a mechanic, and their 2 daughters. I met them once during a tour and they brought cookies. The girls were fascinated by the lilac bush out front. "Can we plant more?" one of them asked. "Plant whatever you want," I told her. "This place is yours now, at least for a while." She beamed like I'd handed her a treasure. And in a way I had. The day before I moved out, I walked through the house one last time. Room by room. Touching the walls. Listening to the floor creak under my feet. Opening the junk drawer just to close it again. I even stood in the empty hallway where Elaine once tried to hand me a peace pie. I chuckled at the memory, though it felt more like a fable than real life. Then I sat on the floor of my bedroom and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the house, for being my witness, my shelter, my final line of defense when everything else collapsed. I locked the front door, slid the keys into the lockbox, and walked away. I didn't look back. Not because I wasn't sentimental, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't need to. Starting college wasn't some glittery cinematic moment. There was no dramatic goodbye. No teary send-off at the airport, just me, a train ticket, and 2 suitcases, one of them way heavier than I remembered packing. I lugged them up the steps of my dorm, sweating through my t-shirt before I even reached the front desk. "Room 312, the RA said, handing me a key and smiling. Like this wasn't the start of my entire life changing. I got to my room and stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Blank white walls, standard issue furniture, a twin bed with plastic wrapping still on the mattress. The window looked out over a courtyard where other freshmen were laughing and calling home. I could hear music playing somewhere down the hall and the muffled sound of someone crying. College. This was it. My first space that wasn't inherited, fought over, or shared with people who treated me like a burden. Mine. The first week was a blur of orientation events, awkward icebreakers, and way too much free pizza. I learned how to navigate campus, avoided the freshman plague barely, and managed to lock myself out of my room twice before I remembered to carry my key. My roommate, a girl named Jo, was a journalism major from Oregon. She had 3 piercings, a dry sense of humor, and a coffee addiction that rivaled mine. "You good with sharing the fridge space?" she asked on day 1. "As long as you don't eat my leftovers without asking," I replied. She grinned. Deal. We clicked faster than I expected. Not in a besties forever kind of way, but in a quiet, respectful, hey, I'll watch your laptop while you go to the bathroom kind of way. That meant more than I realized. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the radiator and the occasional hallway chatter. The quiet here felt different than at home, not lonely, just open, like possibility lived in the silence. A couple of weeks in, I got an email from the property management company back home. Subject monthly update, Mercer Property. The tenants had paid on time, no maintenance issues, the lilac bush was blooming again. I stared at that line for a long time. The lilacs were always Mum's favorite. Even though I barely remembered her, that plant was the one thing I'd protected, like it was sacred. Elaine had once suggested cutting it down to make room for a fire pit, and I nearly lost my mind. Now someone else's little girl was probably picking those blossoms and putting them in a jar by the kitchen sink. And I was okay with that. I didn't miss the house. But sometimes I missed who I was in that house. The version of me who kept going when no one was looking. Who figured out how to file tax returns, register for the SAT, and cook dinner with 1 pan and a microwave. Who held her breath for years and still managed to exhale without bitterness. Sometimes I missed her because she felt stronger than I was now. One night Jo found me sitting on the common room couch at 2 a.m, nursing a lukewarm cup of tea. She flopped down beside me. Bad day. Just a weird one. "You want to talk or want me to shut up and sit here like an emotional support golden retriever?" I smiled. Option B. She nodded, pulled out her phone and started scrolling. We sat in silence, the only light coming from the vending machine. Eventually I spoke. "My dad chose someone else." Jo didn't look up. Parents can suck sometimes. "She wasn't even that special," I continued. "Just louder, pushier, shinier. But she made him feel something. And that mattered more than me." Jo looked over. "Sounds like you matter more than he was willing to admit." I blinked. "I mean, she said you're here. You own a house. You made it out. Sounds like you're the one who got the better deal." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe." She stood and stretched. "Come on, let's get pancakes. My treat. I've got dining points to burn." I laughed. "You're going to spend them all before midterms." She shrugged. "Reckless breakfast spending is my coping mechanism." We walked to the dining hall in our pajamas, laughing about how people in movies always cry in the rain, when in real life it's usually in fluorescent lit bathrooms or during late night cereal runs. And for the first time since I'd left, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. About a month into the semester, I got a package. No return address. Just a manila envelope with my name written in Dad's handwriting. Inside was a card, a check, and a photo. The card was short. "Ivy, I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. I'm trying to be better, but I'm not sure how. I hope you're okay. Love, Dad." The check was for $5,000. The photo was of us, me at age 5, sitting on his shoulders at the county fair, cotton candy in my hand, and his smile big and real. I didn't cry. I didn't text him. I just put the picture on my desk. Because even if he wasn't in my life right now, he had been once. And maybe that was enough for now. As midterms crept up, I threw myself into work. I joined a study group, started helping Jo with her headline edits, and even applied for a job at the campus library. My days filled up with things that mattered, real things. No drama, no passive-aggressive comments, just lectures, reading, and figuring out how to use the laundry room without destroying all my clothes. I still thought about him, about them, about what I lost and what I gained. But I didn't ache for it anymore. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a breakdown or a breakthrough. Sometimes it's just a slow shift. One quiet night, one full fridge, one new friend who sits with you while you drink tea in silence. Sometimes it's remembering how far you've come and realizing you don't want to go back. Ever. The leaves had started to turn on campus. Golden yellows, deep reds, that kind of slow, beautiful decay that only fall can pull off. Jo and I joked that our moods matched the trees, colorful on the outside, a little tired underneath. It was late October when the email came. Subject, urgent, property inquiry regarding Ivy Mercer. It was from a law firm in my hometown. At first, my stomach dropped. I half expected some lawsuit or leftover bill Elaine forgot to pay that somehow became my problem. But when I opened it, it wasn't legal trouble. It was a notification. My father had listed me as his emergency contact, and he'd been in a car accident. I froze. For a second, I just stared at the screen, rereading the sentence over and over again. Like if I blinked hard enough, it would change. He wasn't dead. But he wasn't okay either. The hospital was 3 hours away. I skipped class, packed a bag, and got on the first train back. The entire ride was a blur. Grey buildings, fast fences, everything rushing by like my thoughts. When I got to the hospital, a nurse guided me to his room. He was pale, bandaged, a cast on one leg. Tubes monitors the rhythmic beep of machines like some mechanical heartbeat keeping time. Fractured ribs, broken femur, mild concussion, the nurse explained. He'll recover, but it'll be a process. I nodded, but the words felt far away. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. "Hey," I said, stepping inside. His eyes fluttered open. He blinked confused, then focused. "Ivy," he croaked, voice rough from disuse. I nodded. "Yeah, it's me." His face crumpled like he couldn't believe I was really standing there. "I didn't know who else to call," he whispered. "You didn't call," I said gently. "You just listed me." "That's different." He didn't argue, didn't try to explain. He just let the truth sit there between us, like a third person in the room. Over the next few days, I stayed. Not because I had to, because I chose to. I spoke to the nurses, helped fill out paperwork, and made sure he had someone to talk to who wasn't just giving him meds or taking blood. He never asked why I came, and I never asked why he left. But in the quiet moments between sips of water and awkward tray lunches, we started to talk. Real talk. He told me about the last few months, how Elaine left him 2 weeks after they moved out. Said she couldn't handle being married to someone who couldn't control his own daughter. He admitted that Chase got evicted from his third apartment. That Lena had dropped out of school and was now trying to be an influencer unsuccessfully. He looked tired. Tired in a way that wasn't just physical. "I thought I was choosing peace," he said one night, eyes fixed on the ceiling, "but I was just choosing not to fight for anything." I sat beside him, arms crossed. "I never wanted to be a fight," I said quietly. "You weren't," he whispered. "You were the reason I had anything left to lose." When he was discharged, I helped arrange a temporary care facility while he recovered. He couldn't return to Elaine's sister's house, and he didn't have another plan. So I made one. I didn't bring him back to my house, but I made sure he had a safe place. Nurses, a clean bed, a number he could call. I used part of the rent money to cover his first 2 weeks. Not because I owed him, but because I could. That was the difference now. He called a few days later, voice clearer. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome. I don't expect anything more." "I know." There was a long pause. "But if one day you wanted to talk again, like really talk, I'd be here." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said I know. Back at school, life picked up again like it never paused. Classes, deadlines, walks through fallen leaves. Joe and I started a podcast for fun, mostly just us ranting about pop culture and bad dating stories. Somehow it gained a small following. Nothing viral, but enough to feel heard. One afternoon while we were recording, she asked if you could go back and tell your younger self anything, just one thing, what would it be? I paused. Then said, "You're not hard to love. They just never learned how." Joe blinked. "Damn, want to write that on a hoodie?" We laughed. But later that night, alone in my room, I thought about it again. All those years of being the peacemaker, the helper, the forgotten one. I used to think it made me strong, but real strength isn't just about endurance. It's about knowing when to stop trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. It's about walking away from what's familiar, even if it means being alone for a while, just to make room for what's possible. Thanksgiving rolled around fast, and I stayed on campus. I didn't feel ready to go back. Not to that town, not to that version of myself. Instead, I spent it with a group of other students who didn't fly home. One of them made lasagna, someone else brought a pie that tasted suspiciously like it came from the gas station. We played board games until 2 a.m. and roasted marshmallows over a hot plate because the dorm fire alarm was too sensitive for candles. It was one of the best holidays I ever had. Simple, no performance, just people showing up for each other. And somehow that was enough. A week before finals, I checked my mailbox and found a thin envelope. Inside was a card, no name, just a single line written in familiar, clumsy handwriting. "I'm trying to learn how. Love, Dad." I stared at it for a long time. Not crying. Not hurting, just feeling. Because healing, it turns out, doesn't always come in thunderclaps and apologies. Sometimes it's a small note. Sometimes it's the absence of chaos. Sometimes it's the silence that doesn't scream. And sometimes it's letting go, not to forget, not to erase, but to finally be free. Not back. Forward. Story 2. My relatives attempted to sabotage my sister's golden child wedding. However, my spouse and I reversed the situation by devising the final plan of retaliation. Here I am on my honeymoon writing this lengthy story. But typing it down at last does seem relieving. In any case, this excites my spouse more than the resort beverages. Since I don't have a Reddit account, and my husband, who is an avid Reddit user, stated he doesn't want this linked to his "it's a throwaway." Why isn't this being written by the Reddit guy? He added that I should have the honor of publicizing the tale because it involves my family. However, he is helping me over my shoulder. I don't know whether this works because I'm not a lawyer, but I don't consent to this being republished anyplace else. In order to understand how this conduct got to this point and why our reactions were the way they were, I believe it is first important to provide some background information. It's a lengthy read. My parents have loved my sister more since I can remember. Nor do I mean in subtle ways. They would believe my sister's accusations against me and punish me. The people wouldn't believe me if I accused her. They would attempt to find a way to reprimand me in combination with giving her a lighter penalty, even if there was indisputable proof. She had to like the flavor of my birthday cake. Hers didn't. My parents also always claimed that they were aware that I disliked that particular dessert. She was always somewhat more expensive than I was. Even though it should have been about me, we went to the location she wanted to go. My sister disliked me and was pampered as a child. I was only a punching bag for her. She generally ignored me at first, but when we were in our early teens, things really started to get out of hand. I'm not sure what caused it, but she ended up having no friends and her conduct worsened. Did her pals relocate? Was her meanness the reason they left her? We were never close, so I'm not sure. My parents also enjoy bragging about her accomplishments, but they never bring up any problems. On the other hand, they like continuously bringing up my weaknesses as fodder. We attended the same school, so I only realized she had no friends when I saw that she stopped hanging out with other people. She didn't have any pals, however. I did. I was fairly well liked once. When my sister recognized it, I abruptly ceased being a punching bag and turned into a despised individual that she had to defeat at all costs. She began making additional accusations against me. She made further accusations against my pals. I was no longer permitted to hang out with others by my parents. They're not decent people, was one of the explanations. Why are you attempting to leave us in your sister's opinion? Why are you unable to enjoy family time like your sister? My extended family kept me from being completely alone. Despite significant age disparities, I got along with my cousins and the majority of my family resided in the same hometown. At one event, they invited me to something I can't recall, and I regrettably said I'm not permitted to go anyplace. My kid's unfiltered response when asked why was that, I was prohibited from having friends since my sister didn't have any. That evidently reached the adults who split apart my parents. I was later grounded as though I had nowhere to go for a month and reprimanded for lying. It was worthwhile though because they gave me some wiggle room after that. My sister went to a different school. Her extended family's embarrassment at her poor social standing and her request for a move, I suppose. Since the school was farther away, my parents instantly complied despite the fact that it cost them more. It was at the new school that she made pals. She never returned to the prior state of largely ignoring me though. I suppose she was upset that I informed her family that she had no friends and felt the authority to screw me. She didn't let me leave. I was still living a miserable existence. My parents referred to it as mild teasing when her friends would visit and harass me. My sister would accuse acquaintances of stealing things, and my parents were terrible hosts, so I never invited anyone around. My parents would also accept it. However, because my parents never attempted to do any of that to relatives, I did grow close to my cousins. My first boyfriend followed. My parents insisted on taking him home even though I didn't want to. He once came to locate me after we had parted ways to inform me that my sister was making advances on him. By that she meant that she approached him wearing scant clothes, batted her eyelids wildly, and began telling him how wonderful she was and how awful I was. He was annoyed and rushed to look for me. Naturally, my sister gave my parents a different story about how my boyfriend had made an attempt to flirt with her, but she had declined. How could she harm me like that? Who did my parents think was right? Even though my boyfriend wasn't flawless, I believed him right away for a cruel reason. Recall that I was a teenager at the time and was being treated unfairly. I was irritable and resentful, and I now detested my sister just as much as she detested me. Let's get that disclaimer over with. Let's discuss appearances. They weren't pertinent, so I hadn't brought them up yet. My sister was overweight, but I wasn't, because my parents like to show their love for you by buying you treats, giving you more food, and other ways. I've actually always been a little thin because punishment frequently involved deprivation of snacks and treats. Obviously, it's not about weight. Personality is. However, my sister was already spoiled and impolite at that point. Since she could demand and my parents would provide, she never learnt to work for anything, so even her attempts at flirting were unsuccessful. In addition, she didn't have the appearance of a hot model. Not even my insecure teenage self thought my boyfriend would try to cheat on me with her. In any case, my parents forbade me from dating a boy like that. I made an effort to maintain the relationship in secret, but it was difficult and ultimately it ended. My sister accused my new boyfriend of flirting with her after he turned down her advances. My parents believed her once more. I attempted to explain why this had occurred once more, but they concluded that I was unable to make wise decisions and continued to choose unsuitable boyfriends. The Romeo and Juliet situation was too much for the relationship to handle, and it ended once more. Since I was okay with making out with boys and the like, but refused to be in a relationship, I would eventually be called a slut in high school. Fortunately, neither my parents nor sister ever found out. During this entire period, my sister did bring one man home. He was proudly displayed, and until he stopped turning up, my parents would constantly remind me how wonderful he was, and why I couldn't be like my sister and meet someone like that. All of a sudden, he was a cunning jerk who had deceived my sister. Well, anything. The unfair treatment persisted. At this moment, she had more spending money. Her curfews were far better than mine, and she was allowed to go any place at any time, while I couldn't. If I called it out, my folks would claim it's because she's older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't get the same treatment she had. When brought out, they deny they ever stated it, or say it was because I couldn't be trusted. Like she was using my sister's charges against my lovers and friends as proof of my terrible judgment. Time goes by, and it's time for my sister to graduate. She got admitted into a college, not a very well-regarded one, and she had no scholarship or anything. Again, because only her successes were reported to me. I can't say how severely she was turned down, because I don't even know which university she applied to. We used to rejoice every time she had a B, so I am aware that she did not perform well in school. My parents hesitated to rejoice when I received high marks because they said that you always get those. Is there something to rejoice over? Naturally, there was a lot of pomp, and my parents assured her that they would cover all expenses. I was glad she would be leaving. It didn't make my life any simpler. Every other weekend, she would return home, but for some reason, her room would always be empty. Or some other problem she would come up with to ruin my existence. I still had rigorous curfews, etc. My mother eventually arrived to discuss my upcoming graduation with me. My sister is only a year older than me. It would be better for me to start working as soon as I graduated and wait until my sister finished college to see if they could afford something for me, she explained, because they had no money to pay for my education because they were funding my sister's. Oh, and I would have to pay for all of my belongings, including rent and a portion of the bills if I chose to remain at home. I mentioned that I was eligible for school loans. Yes, except no, Mum responded. That's because they thought I had terrible judgment and were really kind to me. They would determine whether or not attending college was worth incurring debt for. I didn't inquire, but I'm not clear how they would prevent me from obtaining loans. No mention of scholarships was made, they no longer knew what my grades were, and they never thought I was capable. I didn't even blink. I just said okay. My mother obviously didn't anticipate that and persisted. Perhaps she wanted me to have a fit so they could use it as a justification to never pay for my education. However, I remained silent and only expressed my understanding of their stance. Give them credit for their concern. And that was all. Later, my dad made the same attempt, but I too resisted showing emotion. You know, I had no aspirations for my schooling after a lifetime of their awful parenting. I was aware that they would find a way to avoid paying for mine and ruin my life. If I worked and waited for my sister to graduate, I never thought they would finally pay it. I had spent a lot of time getting ready for college. I was hardly able to leave. I had plenty of time to study because I didn't have many pals. Since I believed that education was my sole opportunity to be free, I did. When the time came, I put in a ton of effort and was awarded a scholarship. Even though I knew my sister would detest it and attempt to stop me via my parents, it was a nice enough course at a respectable institution with a full scholarship, not to any place like an Ivy League school or anything like law or medical school. I notified them about my accomplishment on social media at the same time, and I even had myself write a thank you note. Since they would have to justify it to my family, they could no longer prevent me from traveling. At first, they even boasted about it with a hint of pride. My sister must have gotten to them after that. They shifted course and even inquired as to if I was certain I wanted to go. They revealed that my sister was struggling in college and that I would be worse off since she was smarter and wiser than I was. Needless to say, I stood by my principles. They couldn't do anything, but they weren't happy. College saved my life. I became joyful. I still kept in touch with my parents and went to see them on holidays and other occasions, but I was unable to go frequently because of money, because they wouldn't pay for anything. I refrained from introducing them to any men throughout this period. My sister's college attendance has ceased. Once again, they would have made a big deal out of it, so I know she didn't graduate. She returned home without making any rent or bill payments. However, it's not the same. After saying so, my parents began working for the same firm as my mother. Of course, it's because my mother pulled strings, I was made to feel proud of all of this. Oh well, I swear, I'm almost there. It was during this time that I met my spouse. There are others who claim that I would have taken action if I were in X's shoes. My spouse is the kind that actually does. I'm the type of person that is always a doormat and timid, but then at night, I can't stop wishing I had done something, had come up with a clever way to say, etc. When I'm upset, I'm the one who can't stop crying. The one that claps back right away is my hubby. He enjoys drama and finding solutions to it. He is the type of person who won't forgive and forget, so you had best start worried if he doesn't respond right away to a slight. He's only seeking retribution by doing something worse. Although he believed our actions weren't nuclear, he was the one who urged me to publish here and on a board dedicated to nuclear retaliation. People couldn't understand why I dated him, but it was likely because of my upbringing that I couldn't act like him. I didn't dislike it though. My spouse treats people well as long as they treat him well, and I adore that he does what I can't. When we spoke about getting married, we decided that we didn't really care about the ceremony because of our money and would much rather spend it on our honeymoon in Europe. We chose to have it in my hometown because his family was dispersed and mine was still mostly centered there. We could make occasional lengthy weekend visits to handle things because we didn't live too far away. Additionally, there was some work flexibility, so if necessary, we could also spend some time in my hometown. A few months later, we sent out the save the date and the engagement announcement. Naturally, my parents insisted that they meet my partner at this point. I was struggling, but I wanted to get over my inability to reject. I had thought that perhaps my parents weren't so horrible because of the distance. When I informed my husband that I would at least make sure they were never alone with him, it appeared as though I had cancelled Christmas. He had been preparing for this, you see. He even purchased a top-notch recorder. He could record it all while hiding in a pocket. Thinking of all the ways he might turn down my sister's efforts, humiliate her, and then share the tape of her attempts with my family thrilled him. He left alone, eager to see them, and returned later. Euphoric. You won't believe the terrible crap they wanted, darling. We can really screw them over, darling. The options are endless. I wanted to listen to the tape since I was puzzled, but he wisely advised me to listen to him first to avoid misinterpreting him. He went there, but my sister and dad sat him down instead of flirting with him. They said that they will cover the cost of my wedding on one condition after some complaining about things like my judgment and their disapproval of him. At my wedding, my sister would be the first to go down the aisle wearing a bridal gown. Their justifications were that it was improper for a younger sister to be married first, and that it was only right that my sister at least see the event at my location while photos were being shot. My husband will now type his portion, and she will have a cake later as well. Hello, this is a vindictive husband. The best kind of rage is a professional retaliation. Quick, calmer nuclear retaliation. Lurker when his sweetheart gets rejected. As much as my wife though. T. She is my spouse. Right now, make myself seem like this witty guy. I confess that when those people really implied that Troy would like to see the horse again as if it were a magnificent gift, my brains about died. Unfortunately, I did have an entire list of insults ready to be spit out when my brain restarted. But like the devil urging these idiots on, something in my soul spoke in my ear. "I need to think," I said. Observe the reaction of my then fiancé, who fled before I could reveal my evil schemes to my wife. With a smile on his face and the tape to back it up, my husband honestly recalled how my parents wanted my wedding to be about my sister. I assumed even they wouldn't go so far, so I was surprised to see how much the distance had loosened and how poorly they treated me. Fortunately, my spouse insisted on the vengeance angle, which prevented me from losing my cool. From absurdly absurd to what we believed was possible, we had a great time coming up with ways to screw them over. After we came up with a strategy, we phoned his much more sensible sibling. We were reprimanded by our level-headed brother for having 2 venue addresses, giving them the incorrect one, etc. He admitted, however, that he would never be able to persuade us not to strike back. At least he demonstrated to us that it would be difficult to do. We ultimately decided on the most benign option, because some of our other alternatives also ran the danger of having us sued. Hire security and keep her out after pretending that we agreed. Of all, it wouldn't be Provenge if that was all. My husband has done the most of the rest, but he wants me to take the credit, so here we go. It's crucial to note that everything he did was predicated on our shared ideals and had been discussed with me. After questioning me, he returned to my parents and stated he didn't think I would be amenable to it. He didn't see the problem though and didn't want the family to disintegrate. He would be willing to assist them in doing so. "I don't enjoy fighting," he said, "so if I were caught off guard, I may not act out in front of everyone. However, marriage is a significant event, so I may have reacted negatively." So, he proposed a middle ground. They would assist with expenses. Since we would be in the public eye with our families present, I would feel even more pressure to keep quiet. However, I would also be appreciative of their assistance, which would calm me down. He claimed that my parents were taken aback, and that my older sister began to jump with delight, literally jumping like a child. Thus, it was approved. Significant. My spouse also asserted that I was the source of these remarks because of my poor judgment and previous lovers, and I'm really pleased of utilizing their comments against them exclusively. I love to check his phone and other devices to make sure he wasn't cheating on me, since I was controlling and suspicious. As a result, it was crucial that no part of this plan, including any conversations about my sister coming down the aisle before me, ever be documented. The months of deceit began when he would visit their home to chat, leading my sister and parents to believe they were playing a prank on me, while my husband and I were taking advantage of them. How well they preferred to hide rather than pay for the wedding. My parents wanted to be involved in everything, of course. Certain elements such as the color scheme and music have great significance for me. To keep me in line, my spouse would persuade them to overlook it. Everything else was up for grabs though, because we never really liked the ceremony in the first place. Or so they believed. We decided to go examine the food and drink selections. The choice with the lowest or second lowest price is then accepted. It's unfortunate that we don't want to misuse my parents' goodwill, so we wouldn't get the best options, my husband would remark after surreptitiously taking my sister there to try it out as well. When my sister insisted that my parents get the best, my parents would tell me not to worry and would buy the priciest. The photographer, flowers, etc. were all handled in the same way. My husband gave my sister a bouquet of the flowers we had requested, but he lamented that I had preferred some other unappealing flowers. My parents then informed me that they would cover the cost if we choose the people I preferred. Wedding gown. Here we encounter a small obstacle. My parents insisted that I wear a grotesque outfit. It wasn't particularly ugly, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't suit me well. My mum wrote me a message about it, so there would be evidence even though we had intended to say okay and then just not use it. Okay, I said. I had to take us, refusing via SMS and refusing to back down. After saying he would see what he could do, my husband walked over there. In order to have me wear the other outfit, my sister proposed destroying the one I wanted. He feigned agreement. They really avoided texting one another over this entire period. We agreed that I would respond to my sister's messages instead of my husband's. They believed that and never took a chance on anything in writing, since it confirmed my husband's accusations that he was neurotic and domineering. Some individuals may find it offensive that their spouse would go around disparaging them in front of relatives, but I'm such a doormat that I find it hilarious that I would be portrayed as scary and in charge. I pleaded with him to do it. I suppose my sense of humor is distorted, haha. Yes, and he displayed conflicting behavior when my sister tried to flirt with him. Additionally, to convince them that he was with them. Without my awareness, my husband would pretend to tell them stuff, but he never disclosed that we had hired security. It was hilarious. In order to concentrate on our honeymoon, my spouse and I had really contemplated having a courthouse wedding. As a result, we had this lavish wedding with almost any money spent. We referred to it as back pay for my parents' emotional harm, haha. My spouse just verified that I was correct, so I guess he's okay. I was more enjoying the deceiving them part than the real wedding preparation. I never imagined that a man could be so happy about spending his whole Saturday driving to his in-laws to talk about the specifics of his wedding, yet here we are. When the day finally arrived, my sister, husband, and parents devised a plan to wait until everyone was seated because the bride is usually late, and then have my sister arrive at that exact moment to prevent me from seeing her and attempting to stop it. By the time I found out what had happened, it would be too late to take any action. Regarding my dress, my husband took the remaining fabric that we had saved from the adjustments to my parents' house. My sister, who still resides with them, presented them as evidence that he had damaged the clothing. Then he stated he needed to calm me down and had to return to me because I was furious. He promised to meet them at the nuptials. We took care to conceal our true security. When my parents and the guests initially came, all they saw was a woman holding a list of names to look up. We didn't bring out security until my folks had arrived and taken a seat, a man who appeared to be a bodyguard. We warned him not to let anyone in, particularly my sister, and we even promised to tip him well if he didn't tell anyone. The moment soon came. A text was sent to my parents. My dad proceeded to tell people to start as my sister was less than 5 minutes away. My bridesmaids followed his example without consulting me since they had been instructed to do so in advance. My dad stood up at the door as though he was waiting for me after they had all gone down and taken their positions. A buddy who wasn't in the wedding party contacted me to get ready at this time. This was because people could notice if my spouse, a bridesmaid, etc., pulled out a phone and began texting. This acquaintance knew about the scheme. She didn't care about being a bridesmaid or anything, and she's my husband's pal, just as ready to help cause trouble as he is. The bridal hymn began to play as soon as my dad took his place. I entered after the doors had opened. My dad was shocked to see me there. He attempted to look behind me, but he was unable to see what had happened to my sister since we were unable to see the venue entrance. His phone then rang. The caller ID was visible. She was the one. He simply left me there and said something. Everyone was confused and gasping. The friend who was in on it questioned loudly what had occurred. He informed me it wasn't intended to be me there after I lied, and he said it in a tearful voice. My husband and I decided that I should say that to make him appear as horrible as possible if he ventured to leave me, even if it isn't what he said. I wish I could claim that the tears were the result of my excellent acting, but I can't. A part of me didn't believe he would even consider leaving me there in spite of everything. That the sister story was a complex jest rather than fact. I'm not sure. I was and still am hurt. In all honesty, I was trying not to cry. In order for as many people as possible to hear and spread the word, the buddy then said, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" Then she said, "I'll go check," and fled. We made the decision to do this in order to force her to cause trouble for the security and prevent my dad from returning and interrupting the ceremony or anything. My mother also departed at some time. By this time, my husband's father hurried up and grabbed my arm. He had been advised that he could have to. I smiled at him as he ran frantically to me. People were whispering about what had transpired as I walked down the aisle. Apparently several went to check as well. But when I got to my hubby, everything was fine. I felt better because of him. I'm kidding. You had such a genuine, sorrowful expression. You were worthy of an Oscar. I'll drag them over the coals for what they did, so don't worry. Our marriage went smoothly. My parents never returned. During the celebration, I did see a number of individuals leaving and then returning, but nobody ventured to explain what was going on. My spouse did leave when someone whispered in his ear. After a while, he returned with a thundering face, but before he broke character and began to smile, he whispered in my ear that he needed to go hide someplace. What then transpired? Did it work? Here is a summary of the information I later received from friends, relatives, the security guard, and my spouse. Yes, my sister did show up wearing a bridal gown. As agreed with the security, denied her entry. He asserted that because there was previously a bride, she must be at the incorrect location. Yes, we gave him a generous gratuity, just as promised. Declaring that he had never heard of him and that he couldn't be employed there, my dad went there and attempted to frighten him with the police. Since the security guard was employed by us and doing his duties, he consented to the police. My dad tried to insist that he allow my sister in after realizing it would be too late. The friend then approached, began yelling and disparaging my sister, and essentially stalled by asking what was going on. My mother arrived shortly after, followed by others. The wedding plan was now a complete failure. My parents were now limited to repairing the damage. They tried to withdraw it as everyone who found out was speculating. They were being reprimanded and yelled at. Naturally, my sister and all three of my parents declared it was no secret and blamed my husband. My spouse was called at this moment. He put on his most confused face and denied when he arrived. Rejected. Rejected. Gaslight, to use his own words. The gatekeeper. A girl boss. LOL. When they claimed he did, he denied ever agreeing to something so absurd. Naturally, they were unable to offer any past text conversations that would have addressed ordinary wedding decisions, but he insisted on proof. My sister was sobbing and screaming, and it seemed like she was sitting on the floor and kicking her legs like a child. My dad appeared to have beaten my husband, but he was restrained by security and others. Naturally, they claimed they lacked evidence as my husband had instructed them not to text. My spouse chuckled and remarked, "Very handy." The question was then reiterated, why would I ever consent to something so flawed? After accusing them of being terrible parents, he stated he wouldn't let their foolish schemes and deceit to ruin his wedding and turned back to me. Nobody took them seriously. Although there were cameras at the location, they wouldn't show me the footage because it was only for security reasons. However, some of it was videotaped, and it was delightful to see my sister and dad get torn apart by everyone who came out to witness the spectacle. Seeing them eat it was one of the finest wedding presents after years and years of being accused of things and not being believed. My mum was in tears. My father was constantly turning from purple to white. My sister was still sobbing and yelling on the ground. People were wondering why my spouse would agree, but they insisted that he was involved. Why wasn't there any evidence they wanted my sister to perform this during my wedding, but why none of it had any good replies from them? They were eventually ordered to leave and were forced to comply. My sister refused to get off the ground, so my dad supposedly had to haul her up. Once more, I was silent the whole night. They must have wanted to spare me. It seemed like everyone was going out of their way to be kind, upbeat, and enthusiastic about everything. Perhaps because I was the bride and not just a visitor for once. My spouse claims that the pricey food and beverages they were consuming were definitely helpful. We had a great time. My spouse barely kept up the fake irate expression for a few seconds before he smiled once again. We then checked into the hotel to get some rest before our honeymoon. In relation to that, my parents attempted to purchase our airline tickets, but we declined since we believed it was dangerous and they may try to cancel them or something. Naturally, all three of them have attempted to get in touch with me after that entire incident. Due to my husband's insistence on maintaining a paper trail, I have declined their calls. It was a wise move because my sister did message me in the end. The main thing was that she blamed me for her embarrassment, but I won't repeat it because it was really illogical and insane. For months, they were duped by my spouse, whom I referred to as a two-faced snake. He wanted to print that and hang it on our wall, and he was sure that I would be cheated on by him, but he also wished it would happen. She also implied that he was having an affair with her. In reality, my husband stole my phone and grabbed screenshots of my call records, my sister's message, and my parents' texts, requesting that I answer. He shared everything with our family group chat, including screenshots of communications in which he was threatened and called derogatory things, yet he continued to act irrationally. I even threatened to sue them for harassment and slander, but I never committed to anything. He typed a message saying group chat, pleading with my family for assistance since they were now harassing me non-stop. Now that they had failed to spoil my wedding, he pleaded with relatives to aid, prevent them from attempting to ruin my honeymoon. In order to prevent my parents from bringing my sister over and then saying he had miraculously consented to pretend to her in our honeymoon room, He concluded politely by asking that they not disclose our whereabouts. My family told him they would take care of it, so he laughed aloud. Indeed, there has been stillness ever since. In order to tattle again and tear her a new one, my spouse is a bit unhappy that my sister didn't disobey. We'll see how long it lasts. Overall, even though I would certainly like to have a typical loving family at my wedding, they not only failed to spoil something special for me, but I also managed to get them back. Extra info. Why do they behave this way toward me? I'm sure you're all thinking the same thing. Because I am asked this question a lot. I've always puzzled about this, and I'm still not sure. When I was younger, I attempted to inquire, but they denied any distinction and reprimanded me for being pampered, so I gave up. I've considered a lot of options, but based on what I've seen, I believe this. I wasn't anticipated. My sister was not just wanted, but also felt like a miraculous kid after all this time since they took their time to have her. However, considering how little we are in age, I believe they didn't anticipate having a child so quickly or easily, and they didn't use proper protection until much later after my sister was born. They may have been burdened with an unwanted kid while still juggling a newborn, since they didn't realize my mum was pregnant until it was too late. Additionally, they're not very wealthy, so the additional cost probably didn't help. So they were angry with me. However, it is my hypothesis. In any case, I've come to terms with the fact that the answer won't really matter. No matter what they did to me was not justified. Did they truly believe this would be successful? I spoke with my husband, and we came to the conclusion that they had no intention of doing this. We believe that since my sister hardly gets dates and they made that ridiculous proposal to my husband, she pitched a fit about my being married first. In other words, they didn't want to cover the cost of my wedding, didn't believe we would agree, and didn't even think it would look good for them to do it. However, they may appear to be the nice people to my sister and have a reason to deny me any money if they suggested it and were turned down. However, when my husband agreed, they were unable to change their minds for fear of my sister betraying them. Story 3. After 12 years, my unfaithful wife, who abandoned me while I was in the hospital, is again pleading for my forgiveness. Hello, I'm 47-year-old guy Jason. I would want to share a personal experience in order to receive guidance. This dates back to when I was married to my first wife, Susan, 12 years ago. I had 2 kids, Laura and Lucas, who were 3 and 5 years old at the time of my 7-year marriage. Up until that tragic day, we were living our normal lives. I was traveling to work one morning when my car was struck by a fast automobile coming from the other direction. The next thing I recall is waking up on a plastered and bandaged hospital bed. After 2 days in a coma, I woke up, the nurse told me. I thanked my doctor for saving my life while holding his hand. Although I was thankful for the new life, I had no idea of the impending catastrophe. My doctor told me after a week of therapy that I would never be able to walk again since my lower body was paralyzed. I was broken. Susan was devastated by this information. She had to oversee the children and the house in every way, so it was obviously challenging for her. Being unable to understand my existence in a wheelchair caused me to sink into sadness. I cursed the way my life had fallen apart as I spent the day gazing at the barren walls of my hospital room. I feared that I would never be able to dance with my wife, play soccer with my kids, or experience freedom again. During the first several days of my stay, Susan ceased coming to see me, which made my situation even more terrible. 3 times a week she brought the kids. I just lived for the times I spent with my loved ones. However, her visits got fewer in number as the days went by. She would explain that the kids didn't want to see me, which made me feel hopeless every time I begged her to bring the kids to see me. I definitely can't spend my life with a handicapped man, she said, handing me the divorce papers one day. I'm still attractive and youthful. I'm worthy of a regular dude. If I claimed not to have anticipated it, I would be lying. When she began to ignore me, I knew we were going to part ways, but I didn't anticipate it happening so quickly. Some acquaintances told me a month after my injury that they had spotted Susan walking about hand in hand with a middle-aged man, most likely in his 50s, on weekends and evenings in cafes and shopping centers. Some alleged that she had an affair before to my accident, while others said that she was desperate enough to date a big, sour old guy. Little more than 2 months had passed since my accident. I was given divorce papers even though I hadn't been released yet. Although I may have come out as composed when writing this, I was anything but at the time. I was heartbroken, distraught and agitated. I was poor divorced, confined to a wheelchair, and had neither money nor savings. Household costs and finances for the children's education were forgotten after the EMIs were paid. Fortunately, my insurance partially paid for my hospital expenses. In the end, I had nothing left over after having to use my funds to cover the remaining costs. I wanted to scream, hit my head on the wall, and curse my bad luck. Something inside of me kept me sane, but I'm not sure how I managed to maintain myself at the time. After being released, I moved home with my parents, most likely to exact revenge. I was 35 years old, divorced, jobless, and financially and physically reliant on my elderly mother. She was a florist, my mother. She had a little suburban store. Her costs were covered by the pension funds and the meager revenue from the shop. She volunteered to help me out with that slim resource. For a 35-year-old guy to rely on a 60-year-old mother was the most unsettling experience. I went to see my kids shortly after I was released from the hospital. My home was locked when I got there. The neighbors informed me that Susan and the kids had moved in with her boyfriend. My neighbor said that Susan's lover was an obese elderly man who had been divorced twice but was extremely wealthy and childless. For sleeping with a sour old guy for his wealth, some even called Susan a cheap and gold digger. I got her boyfriend's address and made it to his place. Susan refused to let me see my kids when I got to her new house, claiming that they had already adapted to her lover and were calling him Daddy. She said that they would become much more perplexed by my abrupt entrance. When I demanded to see my kids, she threatened to issue a restraining order. I had no money to hire an attorney. I retreated since I was barely making ends meet on my mother's low paycheck. It was just a few months after my divorce and less than 6 months after my injury. She previously shared a home with a man. I was repulsed. I questioned her about how she could leave me and move on so fast. I realize I'm immature. I was a parent in a wheelchair, powerless. I mean, what else could I do? I begged her to give me at least one opportunity to prove myself. By claiming that I was a burden in her life, she denigrated me. Since our divorce was finalized a month ago and she was already living with her lover, I asked her if she had cheated on me prior to the divorce, saying it was none of my business and that I should never again expose my ugly face to her. She escorted me away. I continued to gaze at her as I thought back on my 7 years of marriage to a woman who within months replaced me with another man. My eyes were watering as I walked out. The humiliation left me feeling defeated when I returned home. My mother comforted me after I sobbed like a 5-year-old in front of her. She inspired me to take responsibility for my life. I had no idea what I was doing. To begin with, I had no direction. I went to my mum's shop with her. I assisted her in cleaning the store, serving customers, and creating bouquets. I eventually came to the conclusion that the company had enormous growth potential. However, my mother was too weak to do it on her own. In order to get agreements with event management firms to provide flowers for events, I dug through my old contacts. I gradually assembled a staff to handle venue decor contracts before starting my own event management business. Rebuilding my life for myself took 12 long years. I had my mother's support. She encouraged and supported me throughout the entire process. I found out Susan was leaving the city with my kids and her lover a year after my accident. I hurried to the house to meet my kids, but by the time I got there, they were gone. Prior to that, I made several attempts to connect with my kids, but Susan would always insult me and push me away. Susan could make all the decisions for the kids because she had full custody of them. Due to my financial and physical limitations, I was unable to challenge joint custody. I was too poor to hire a lawyer, so I was unable to contest her restraining order. Susan, on the other hand, had a wealthy boyfriend. I was unaware of whether he was already with her prior to my accident or how he entered Susan's life out of the blue. All I knew was that he was a wealthy man with ample ancestral property. In the last 12 years, whenever I got any leads about my children, I traveled to meet them but failed every time Susan threatened to get me arrested, as her boyfriend had the money and contacts to get away with anything. By the way, that man didn't marry Susan even after 12 years, although they lived together. A year ago, I finally filed for joint custody. I was waiting eagerly for my event management business to stabilize. I filed for custody and finally managed to get 15 days. They were flying next week to my house. Although Susan did her best to object to my plea in court, I hired a good lawyer who presented my case well, and I got 15 days. Besides, my children are grown-ups now, and they were asked if they wanted to meet me, and they affirmed with a yes. I know I can't compensate for the last 12 years, but I wish to spend quality time with my children. As the moment is coming, I'm feeling apprehensive and excited at the same time. They're 17 and 15 now. I know teens are demanding these days. I pray that my children are not cruel and poisonous to the extreme. I don't know what tale Susan has given them in the previous 12 years, and whether I should tell them the truth about their mother. I don't know. Do you guys have any recommendations on this? How do I approach them? I'm incredibly worried and super excited. Let's share with the community for a couple of remarks. First remark, thanks guy, you stood despite all odds. Good luck. The following remark states I'd recommend taking things slow and going with the flow. See how the children react with you. Allow them to develop a relationship with their grandmothers. You can win your kids over with bond. Before we continue, one more thing to say. Don't reveal too much too soon. You'd come across as desperate. Check out what they've got for you. Be cautious if the children are bad, since your ex would have undoubtedly influenced them to the core. Whoa. This is terrible, OP. I'm very sorry you had to go through all of this. We really ought to be able to rely on our family and partners for help during difficult times. I'm so sad that you couldn't have it. You survived it by yourself. Additionally, you are a courageous and powerful man, regardless of the cards you were given. Fortunately, you survived. Additionally, you get the opportunity to visit your kids once more. We should be thankful for this. It's encouraging that they want to meet you. Simply be who you are and enjoy every second you have with them. First update. I have a lot to share. In my initial post, I omitted 2 important details. Let's start with Amy, my present wife. Yes, 5 years ago, I got married again to a lovely woman. Amy works as an interior designer. She was planning the wedding site when I met her, and we were supplying the flowers. I had not yet launched my own business. Back then. Although it wasn't love at first sight, we managed to survive. Over the following few months, we continued to cross paths at these gatherings and grew close. She had a 3-year-old kid and was a single mother. She had the contacts and industry experience from her many years of employment at one of the firms, therefore she came up with the concept to launch the event management company. She and I collaborated to start the company. Before we were married, we dated for a year. We are now a contented family of 4 Amy. Mia, her daughter, my mum and I, both my mother and her kid, were thrilled to have a grandmother. The second piece of information concerned compensation for accidents. Ideally, the logistics business that owned the vehicle should have paid me for being struck by a fast truck. However, at the time, the corporation manipulated the accident facts and placed the responsibility on me getting away with paying nothing. I didn't receive any money since I couldn't afford to employ a skilled attorney at the time. You understand how large corporations operate. To save their backs, they pay their lawyers in explosives. Amy advised me to resubmit the case when we were married, since we could now afford a qualified attorney. Although the case is still pending, my attorney has given us a good indication that the verdict will be in our favor. Okay, returning to my narrative. After 12 years of my divorce, my kids were meant to come see me, as I said in my initial post 3 months ago. Amy helped me to relax and encouraged me despite my excitement and anxiety. I went to collect them up from the airport during this time. Laura the older is now 15 and Lucas the younger is 13. They are now lovely and attractive adults, teenagers. We didn't have much to say after the first welcomes. The trip from the airport to the house was difficult for all 3 of us. I asked them about their city and school life in an attempt to start a conversation. I purposely avoided the discussion of their mother. They didn't mention her either. The kids were remarkably quiet. Or perhaps like many teenagers, they were searching for a chance to put in their earbuds. Amy greeted us when we arrived home. The kids were surprised, as though they hadn't expected this. When their mother moved in with another guy, just months after our divorce, Amy surprised them. I'm not sure why. Why couldn't I get married again? Amy had prepared the children's guest room. During our brunch together, Amy presented the family's planned vacation schedule. They responded to everything in a neutral manner. They didn't reject the proposal, nor were they thrilled about it. Their conflicting reactions perplexed Amy and me. Their mother, Susan, called me shortly after they locked themselves in the room and accused me of deceiving our kids. She claimed that Amy and I had brought the kids to my house in order to control them. Her actions left me confused. I was accused by her of concealing the reality of my marriage. Her charges made me ponder. She kept calling me even after I hung up. I made the decision to confront the issue. I asked my kids over the phone what was wrong. They were reluctant at first, but then they spoke up. They claimed that I had left them, which infuriated them. Susan had ingrained all falsehoods and dishonesty in the children's minds, turning them against me. I told them straight out that their mother had jumped to another man as soon as she had the chance. Even though they were young at the time, they had vivid memories of those events. I explained to them how Susan had threatened and repelled me any time I attempted to get in touch with them, and how she had vanished with them to the old man's place. To meet with them, I presented them with the restraining letter and all of my denied pleas. They were crying and felt bad for falling for their mother's falsehoods for all these years. Lucas, my younger son, acknowledged that after Susan found him attempting to contact me on social media, she emotionally bullied him into swearing never to do so again. The kids also acknowledged that Susan's husband had reprimanded them. Due to their unmarried status, Susan and the kids suffered mistreatment at family get-togethers. Susan remained in his home as a mistress. They never saw the man as a father figure, even if he funded their schooling. When I learned of my children's hardship, my heart hurt. After the whole truth was revealed, we sobbed uncontrollably and gave each other hugs. We had a terrific time together on our week-long trip to Florida. Amy and Mia, who was turning 8 this year, grew close to Laura and Lucas. Seeing my entire family at one place makes me very happy. My kids posted pictures of our family on social media with the remark, "Happy family." Susan phoned them up as soon as she saw those pictures and scolded them for their stupidity. By uniting with us, she accused them of betraying her. She threatened via text that if I did anything to turn my kids against her, she would not allow me to see them again. I dismissed her baseless threats with a grin and carried on with our trip. My kids caught up with my family once they got back from their holiday. When they were ready to depart, I was thrilled to see the old ties revive after my relatives had welcomed them. Despite Susan's warnings, they agreed to stay in contact. They said that residing in that house made them feel trapped, and that when they graduated from high school, they would return with me. I gave them a hug and said goodbye. When they returned, they confronted Susan about her evilness, but she flipped on me saying I had used them against her. Although they haven't been back for a few months, we still communicate frequently. I wish they were with me again. I'll keep you informed if anything changes. Many thanks. First remark, how wonderful it must be to have everything on the table and to be completely open and honest with your children. Even their own mother was incapable of doing it. She is scared of the repercussions of her actions and still can't accept responsibility for what she did to you all those years ago, as seen by her threat to keep you from turning them against her. Your children had to grow up without their father because of her lies. The second update. Hello everyone, I realize I haven't posted in a while. The past 6 months have seen a great deal of turmoil. 3 months after I met my kids for the first time. A settlement was reached in the ongoing legal dispute against the logistics firm. You know what, I received a sizable settlement for both the accident and the unfairness of the initial trial. I don't know whether I mentioned it, but the logistics firm whose truck crashed into my car twisted the case at the first trial to blame me for the collision. As a result, I received no payment whatsoever. At my wife's recommendation, I made another appeal and was successful this time. My kids were just as thrilled when I told them the news. I pledged to keep them with me forever, and they wanted to meet me. Susan arrived at my office a month later. She appealed for my pardon while holding my hand. Her quick entrance surprised me. She acknowledged that she became desperate after my injury and went in search of an elderly man who was looking for a sugar baby. Before I looked it up on Google that day, I was unaware of all these phrases. After a few months, the younger woman he had terrible experiences with stole his money. He so made the decision to be married to Susan, a 32-year-old sugar girl at the time. Susan's allegiance was ensured by the fact that she had 2 children. Because he didn't want to share the inheritance with my children, the man had made it plain that he would not marry her and would instead retain her as a mistress. He pledged to provide them their food and education, so Susan accepted his stipulations. I questioned her about her lack of employment. She claimed she had never worked and was uncertain if she could make enough money to live the kind of life her partner provided for her for nothing. She insisted that she took every precaution to safeguard the children's future. She refused to back down, claiming that if she hadn't taken that action, the kids would have lived in poverty. I became so irritated with her constant pestering that I screamed at her, telling her that if she was so worried about her children's future, she could have at least given me a chance to recover. She ought to have talked to me about it, rather than making snap judgments and leaving me without warning. I explained that her entreaties were irrelevant since I had moved on. She talked about all of our wonderful times together, including our wedding and the birth of our 2 kids. I dismissed her, claiming that all those memories had vanished and that I was now a different person. They held no significance for me. By claiming that she and my kids, not Amy and Mia, were my biological family, she went too far. She said that Mia was not my daughter and that Amy and Mia would never make a good family. I was repulsed by her ruthless mindset. In order for the rest of the family to get back together, she requested that I accept her back. I told her that my true family is Amy and Mia, not her, and that I adore them. She caused a commotion by refusing to leave my office. Only when I threatened to call the police did she go. I told my mother and Amy about this when I got home. Although this understandably upset Amy, she is a responsible adult and didn't let it bother her. According to my mother, Susan's selfishness is the reason she never liked her. Mum even claimed that the money I received following the court settlement was the main reason Susan had come back to me. Indeed, the woman is a gold digger. My kids reprimanded their mother and warned her to stay in her lane once they found out about her actions. Her sugar daddy threatened to toss her out if she attempted to contact me again. I'm not sure how he found out about this. I am really grateful to him. My kids will be moving in with me this month according to the most recent information. Before I placed them in a local college, they would spend a short time with us. They desired to live in a dorm and enjoy their time in college. I think we should stay in touch while also giving ourselves some time to get to know one another. Susan is left with nothing but her sugar daddy after the children have abandoned her. She should love the sweetness till it turns sour, I hope. Let's see what feedback the community has to offer. First of all, I really like how you poke fun at the sugar daddy issue. When she had the chance, Susan, a freeloader, leaped to the old guy. It's true that she cheated on you before receiving her just desserts. Ultimately, please send me the lawyer's contact information, another commenter added. Someone I know is enmeshed in a comparable legal dispute. I adore how you overcame all obstacles to win. Man, good luck. That she returned after you received a sizable payment is not unexpected. She had nothing after losing her children, as you were. At last, everything caught up with her. Best wishes to you and your children. The road ahead is bright. How do you interpret all of this? Thank you for visiting us today, and please share your thoughts in the comments section below. To ensure you don't miss our next video, please press the notification bell, like, and subscribe. We would be sorry if you missed it. I'll see you later.